Hi, and welcome to Rediscovering RC, my personal journey as I delve back into the RC hobby and RC racing after several years of being out. I thought I'd start this channel by talking a little bit more about my personal history, what got me into RC racing, what made me stop, and where I hope to accomplish moving forward with this channel. It all started back in the early 80s by way of a cousin who came over one day with a simple little pan car with a Ferrari body on it. I was just overwhelmed with how awesome that little car was, racing it up and down the street, and he let me borrow it for a week actually, and I don't think there was a single day that I didn't race with that little car. It was really fun, and it really got me into discovering what the hobby was all about. Fast forward some time later, and I did end up buying a Tamiya Grasshopper, which was my first bashing buggy, along with some friends who we used to rip up and down the street with it. It was a little discerning at first because they had better cars than I had, all in the Tamiya line. But I made do with what I had at the time. It really got me interested in the RC hobby even further, and it was fun. But the motorsports enthusiast that was growing in me, wanted a little bit more. It was around that time that I picked up an issue of RC Car Action magazine, where I realized that you could actually race these cars. So I started doing my research and reading up. And eventually wound up getting a Vic 4 pan car. Again, it was a car that was originally designed and powered by Art Carbonell, who was a legend in the 12-scale racing back then. I was able to become a little bit more competitive. A local track had opened up at the time, and it really brought out the RC fan in me. I week after week I would go to the racetrack, run, and it was really fun. So after some time, I found my limits with the Vic 4 car, and I was looking for something a little bit more competitive. So around that time was when the Associated Electric's RC10L came out, and it was really a car that everybody was starting to get into. So I had to pick one up, and I picked one up basically went all in. I got better equipment. I ended up getting a Magnum Junior radio at that time. I wound up getting a Novak ESC and a receiver combination with it. And really that was when I started getting competitive with the car. I think in those years, which we're talking around 89, 90, is where I really learned the most in terms of the RC hobby. I started off with stock like most people do, but I found myself just only so competitive in stock. I mean, things haven't changed today from what I've gathered. Stock is almost like a professional class. You really have to know what you're doing. And I was getting frustrated with all these people who are spending all this money on equipment and things just to prep their motors. I mean, back then with brushed motors, I mean, you had to lubricate the bushings that came in the stock motors. People were cutting brushes, using different brush compounds. I mean, it was a small fortune to keep these things running and racing. So, like most people at the time, I just basically transitioned into mod racing. It was a lot easier to upkeep. You had ball bearings in the motors. You can open and maintain the motors. So it was really a more economical approach to racing. There were difficult aspects of modified racing, but I kind of settled in and became competitive within a short time. So I ended up competing at the state level. I lived down here in Florida, and we had a really competitive series, which is still ongoing today, and I believe it's one of the longest running series around the country as far as a continuous series that has never stopped. But for the most part, back in the late 80s, early 90s, 10-scale pan cars ruled. And this is my original RC10L that I raced. It's a little bit dusty, but I made a few modifications over the years. I upgraded the arms to the arms that later became standard on the RC10L2. I upgraded to the team shock that also came out with the RC10L2, and just had some custom little things here and there. Basically used fiberglass tape to kind of help dampen the discs that originally came on this car, and really just maintain this car well. I was able to win a few local championships in my area with this car. I ran really well for an unsponsored driver at the time in the state series. I was getting up there and making it to the top of the B mains before Hurricane Andrew, which came through South Florida in 1992, really kind of upset my my aspiring RC career, you could say. And it was really a down period, not just for me personally, but for the area in general. It destroyed the local hobby shop and the racetrack where we used to race, so we really didn't have a scene for a while. You know, and it would be some time. It really killed the community that we had built up in this area. So fast forward a few years after that, and you know, I didn't do any racing for a couple of years. It took me a while to get myself back on my feet, but again, the passion was still there, and I wanted to get back into racing. So I went ahead and did a couple of things. I repurchased another associated vehicle, this time an associated TC3, which I still have here. It's my original TC3. And I also purchased a Serpent Impulse because I'd wanted to get into nitro racing. A friend of mine had introduced me with the 8 scale Vector that he had purchased at the time. But I wanted to, you know, with the advent of touring car racing, which was just starting to come out, and really Serpent was one of those companies that started that class, I wanted to start on a smaller level before making the step up to 8 scale. So I started off with electric as well, and I got the associated TC3, which is here. I had my Serpent Impulse, but actually I sold it not too long ago when I decided that I wanted to make this channel, because obviously with the old equipment, you know, you can't really run this stuff anymore. But anyways, you know, I ran for a little bit here. The scene at that time down here in South Florida was a little unstable, I guess you could say. There really wasn't a consistent place to run, and after a couple of years, I just, you know, I couldn't keep up anymore. The community was down. Sometimes you couldn't get enough people to show up to race. And again, I've always appreciated the racing aspect of the hobby. So to just run it on the street and bash really wasn't for me, and I ended up stepping away from the hobby once again. So there's a little bit of my history in the hobby, and it's been more than 15 years since I stepped away, and a lot of things have happened since then. I've gotten married, I have kids now, and they're just starting to get to the age now where, you know, I really want to introduce them to the hobby and the way things have changed. So as I step back into the hobby, I want to rediscover all the things that have changed over the years. I want to see what is still the same. And most importantly, I want to grow. Hopefully I can get back involved into the hobby and make this something that I can share with my kids growing up. Some of the best friendships that I had were made by way of the hobby. And I think it's just a great learning experience, especially for anybody that has interest in mechanics, engineering. You know, it really is an entry point that could lead to bigger and better things for a young person later on in life. So as I step back into the hobby, I really want to step back in with an open mind. You know, sometimes people, you know, stick to the same brands. They stick to, you know, to things that they knew before. And I can do that. It is all possible. But, you know, like I said, I want to rediscover, you know, just like someone new stepping in, and be open, do my own research and check to see what is possible. So in the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the brands that I choose after I've gotten a chance to get everything together here. And, you know, we'll talk about what I chose and why I chose it. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this first episode. I hope you come back. As always, I thank you for, you know, coming to the channel and watching my video. Please, by all means, like, comment, favorite, and subscribe. I hope to hear from the community at large, and hope to see you soon. My name is Julio, and I thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.